Despite not winning a championship since 1998, the Chicago Bulls have still been a pretty damn solid franchise in the more than 20 years since. Sure, they haven't won a championship, but they've managed to put together some pretty good and exciting playoff teams. The cores of these teams have varied, but overall, they've still been good, only missing the playoffs 9 times from 2000 to 2020. Since then though, the Bulls have managed to put together what should be a playoff team on paper, featuring Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, and Lonzo Ball. Despite this, they've failed to make the postseason in 2 out of the 3 years they've been together. Now, with the team flustering, it seems like this core is on the verge of collapsing following some new reports. Once this core was formed following the signing of DeMar and Lonzo, many thought they'd at least be pushing for a top 5 seed in the East. However, as I've said, they failed to do this. Yeah, this might be a good team on paper, but once you take a deeper dive, it's pretty clear that this team just doesn't work together and was never going to. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down what's gone wrong with the Bulls over the last couple of years, as well as what their next move should be. If you're new to the channel and like this content, please remember to like and subscribe so I can reach my goal of 1,500 subscribers by the halfway point of the NBA season. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. Now, this Bulls core was a long time coming, as it started when they acquired Zach LaVine from the Timberwolves in the Jimmy Butler trade, and then they simply tried building a young core around guys like him, Lauri Markkanen before he was good, and Wendell Carter. However, this core wasn't making any strides, and the Bulls decided it would be best to push toward the playoffs. With that in mind, just about 3 years into giving this core a chance, the Bulls began to make some moves for playoff contention, acquiring 2-time All-Star Nikola Vucevic in a trade with the Magic that sent Orlando Wendell Carter, Otto Porter, and 2 first-round picks. At first, this trade seemed great. Vucevic had just made an All-Star game and looked incredible throughout the entire season. In this time, Vucevic averaged 23 points, which is a career high, 12 rebounds, and about 4 assists a game, while shooting 48% from the field and 40% from 3 on 6 attempts. Even with Vucevic playing this well, the Bulls would just go 11-15 in their final 26 games following the trade, and while some will blame this on Zach LaVine missing 14 of the final 26, even when they were both on the floor, the Bulls went 7-8, so it was pretty clear that they needed more. Following all of this, the Bulls won just 31 games and still clearly weren't ready for the playoffs, but with a shit ton of cap space and young assets to make moves with, things were looking up for the Bulls. And with that in mind, they went out and signed DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso, and Lonzo Ball to big contracts. This solved 2 of the Bulls' biggest issues at the time, as they really needed more offensive creation outside of LaVine, as the team ranked 21st in offensive rating, and defensively, Caruso and Lonzo brought a lot. On paper, this team was looking pretty solid. They definitely had issues, but it certainly looked like this new Big Four could easily be a top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. They had the defense with Lonzo, Caruso, and Patrick Williams, alongside more shot creation with DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine, and they still managed to keep their young assets like Patrick Williams again and Kobe White. Entering the season, things were looking the best that they had for the Bulls in a very long time, and once the 2021-22 season came around, it seemed like the hype was worthy, as the Bulls started off 10-4 and remained a top seed in the Eastern Conference for a while. However, injuries would begin to take a toll on their hot start to the year, and they'd very quickly begin to cool down. Not only did Lonzo Ball suffer a knee injury that would cost him to play just 35 games, but Alex Caruso would only play 41, and Patrick Williams would play just 17. Regardless, the Bulls' main 3 of Vooch, DeRozan, and LaVine all looked pretty damn good this year. DeRozan and LaVine both made the All-Star game, and Vucevic remained a strong interior force, despite not being nearly the same shooter he was the season prior. Even with them playing this well though, the Bulls could only do so much without 3 of their best defenders. This caused them to win 46 games and make the playoffs as the 6th seed. On the year, they had the 13th ranked offense and the 22nd ranked defense, and when looking at their stats from the main 3, alongside the loss of Pat Will, Lonzo, and Caruso, this checks out. Overall, this core was decent in their first year. They had some really bad moments, but they also had some really good moments as well, so surely, heading into next season with a healthy and recovered Lonzo, Caruso, and Patrick Williams, the team will be pushing for their 2nd playoff appearance in a row. right? Going into the 2022-23 season, the Bulls didn't make many moves, and they really couldn't because of everything they did in the season prior. However, the knee injury that Lonzo sustained last season ended up being a lot worse than initially anticipated, and it would require him to have 3 surgeries in a little over a year according to ESPN, so obviously he would miss the entire season. This left a big hole in the Bulls starting lineup, as obviously he provides a ton of defense, but the playmaking and 3-point shooting he brought as well were really important. Regardless though, the Bulls core still should have been able to put together a competent offense. Hilariously enough though, they did the exact opposite. Not only were the Bulls 24th in offense, but they were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the NBA, hitting 36% of their threes, which is about league average, but they took the least amount of threes in the entire NBA. Weirdly enough though, despite having 3 all-star level offensive players that aren't very good on defense, the Bulls managed to, again, have a bottom 6 offense, yet had the 5th best defense in the entire NBA, even without Lonzo Ball. On paper, you can kind of see why this team was so good on defense, as not only did Alex Caruso make an all-defensive team, but Patrick Williams also played all 82 games, and another really underrated aspect of this defense was their young guards in Ayo Dosunmu and Kobe White. Ayo has always been a positive on that side of the ball, but Kobe White, after being a pretty damn defender for all of his career, really turned it around and was a pretty big difference maker for the Bulls on that side of the ball. To the casual NBA fan, it's weird to see a team with LaVine, Vucevic, and DeRozan have a bottom 5 offense, and it did play a big role in the team's downfall. By the end of the season, the Bulls had won just 40 games, barely sneaking into the play-in as a 10th seed, beating the Raptors in Game 1, before eventually falling to the Heat, who would go on to make the finals. Despite the flashes from last season, it was pretty clear that this team didn't have it in them. Sure, the defense was promising, but if the team was going to have such a bad offense, despite having so much talent, it was clear that something needed to change. And this led to a lot of fans calling for the front office to blow it up and rebuild at either the trade deadline or in the offseason. And oddly enough, they kinda did the opposite, as in the offseason they signed Nikola Vucevic to an extension, but even then, I guess that the bigger deal could be used in a trade. Regardless though, we've now seen 2 years of this Bulls team both at full health and not, and it was clear that this team wasn't going to magically fix itself, so why not trade your pieces away while they have value and rebuild? Well, that brings us to today. The 2023-24 season has seen the Bulls looking the worst they ever have. While they still don't have Lonzo back, and now we don't know if they ever will, LaVine, DeRozan, and Vucevic have all remained healthy, and the team just flat out sucks. Not only is their offense amongst the worst in the NBA, but their defense is now around league average as opposed to being a top 5 unit. It was one thing for the Bulls to be a bad offensive team last year because their big 3 were still playing well. This season though, the only one who looks decent is Vucevic, because both DeRozan and LaVine are having some of the worst statistical seasons we've seen from them in years. Now, with how poor they've played so far, their value is likely going to be a lot lower than it was before the season started, which brings me back to my earlier question of why not just trade them away in the offseason. There have been talks around the league about the Bulls finally blowing it up, and it feels as likely as ever for it to happen. At the very least, it seems like Zach LaVine is definitely going to be gone soon because he's allegedly made it known that he wants out and has even given a list of preferred destinations. However, I have kind of a hard time seeing what the Bulls could really get for LaVine, as not only did Woj say that there's not really a trade market for him, but LaVine is an incredibly one-dimensional player, as he only really excels as a scorer and is a pretty clear negative at almost every other aspect of basketball, and is set to make over $40 million in each of his next 3 seasons. But who knows, maybe the package will prove me wrong, and I'll look stupid for recording this ahead of time. But as for the other two, DeRozan is still an all-star caliber player, but he's on an expiring contract and already has issues with his history of poor playoff performances and lack of a 3-point shot. And Nikola Vucevic is still a very fine player, but getting anything close to what they traded for Vucevic in return for the 33-year-old is just impossible. So realistically, while the Bulls can likely get enough draft picks and decent young players to fully kick off a rebuild, it isn't going to be close to being worth what they gave up for these guys in the first place, which just goes to show why putting this core together in the first place may have been a bad idea. Forget bringing in LaVine and DeRozan, as LaVine came in the Jimmy Butler trade that was going to happen regardless, and DeRozan came in a sign and trade where the Bulls didn't really give up much. But the Nikola Vucevic trade is looking really bad right now. Not only are the Bulls likely to trade Vuce just 3 years into his tenure, considering how good the assets they gave up are looking, this is just a clear-cut failure from the front office. In this trade, again, the Bulls sent Wendell Carter and 2 first-round picks for Vucevic, and not only has Wendell Carter shined with the Magic thus far, but the picks turned into Franz Wagner, who's one of the league's most promising young wings, and Jet Howard, a rookie this season from Michigan, who probably would have helped with a lot of the Bulls' offensive issues. Now, I'm not going to debate whether or not Wendell Carter is better than Vuce, but the gap between the two is not big enough to make up for how good Wagner and Howard likely are going to be. I know a lot of Bulls fans who weren't very happy about this deal at the time it happened and are still pissed to this day. Honestly, thinking about what the Bulls could look like had they not signed DeRozan or traded for Vuce is more exciting than where they're at right now. They'd be packed with young talent and would still have Zach LaVine, who they could keep and try to build with or trade like they're going to now. They already have some interesting pieces in Patrick Williams, who is still a promising player despite his slow start, Kobe White, Ayo, and Dallin Terry, so imagining what this team could look like when adding Franz and Jet Howard, or even just players available in that pick range the Bulls could have taken instead, really hurts to think about. Overall, while this main core had potential to be fun, the Bulls needed to be realistic. How far was a core of Lonzo, LaVine, DeRozan, and Vucevic going to take them? It certainly wasn't going to lead to a championship, let alone a conference finals or even second round appearance. While the effort's cool, these moves are going to end up doing more bad than good in the future. So where do the Bulls go from here? It's pretty simple. Get guys like DeRozan, Vuce, and Caruso out of there, fire Billy Donovan and probably their GM Arturas Karnisovas as well, and just restart. Probably aren't going to get any crazy assets for these guys, but it'll be enough for them to tank while still having a somewhat interesting future moving forward. This core had potential, but it was always clear that they had a limited ceiling. But hopefully, the Bulls do the right thing and give it up soon for the sake of their future. But with that being said, I'm going to wrap things up here. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe so I can reach my goal of 1,500 subscribers by the halfway point of the NBA season. Let me know in the comments below what you think the Bulls should do moving forward. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.